All right. Good morning, everybody, and happy Tuesday to you. Seems like it's the first day of the year where we've got a little bit of ice, snow out there. In the past, maybe we would have been hoping for a 2 hour delay, but obviously, with the virtual learning, that's not going to make a difference. Um, we're at 14 people right now, so before I get too far ahead of myself, I am going to Um, probably wait another minute to minute and a half to admit more people. Um, Most of you probably have already done this, but if you have not yet, under week 15, there is a African travel poster, and I had about 50 out of 85 submissions, and so if you haven't submitted it yet, submit it to me via Canvas message directly, and we'll go from there. Okay. You still can get a good amount of points on it, so don't take a zero. Guys, zeros are not heroes right now, especially at this point in the semester. We do have a faculty meeting tomorrow morning, so I expect to have a few more answers on how final exams are going to work and all that. So I should be able to give you a little bit more information starting tomorrow. Till then, it's been a bit of a guessing game for everybody. All right, so I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and I've got two review questions for you that we have. We already talked about at least one of these, and possibly two of these yesterday. So what I want you to do is in the chat function, I want you to post post answers to two of these three questions, okay? We still got people coming in here, so all right. So for today, name two things the Greeks or Romans were known for. All right, so a little bit of a review to classical Mediterranean world. What is a Renaissance? And this is kind of the more interesting one. Can you name some things that have experienced a Renaissance in our own culture? If you know what a Renaissance is, then you probably can answer this. So go ahead and answer two of the three, please, in the chat function. Okay, let's try to shoot for two of the three. So the established line is a Renaissance is a rebirth. We did talk about that yesterday. All right, we're getting some good responses so far. If you don't respond, you will not get participation points for today. So you need to take at least take a guess. You can send it to me in a private message if you don't want it to everybody. An example of something that has experienced a renaissance would be the Nike jacket that I'm wearing right now. It was very popular in the early 1990s, and they produced it again in the year 2019, and it became very popular. And instead of selling it for $40, they now sell it for $120. So maybe, I mean, there's a lot of things in pop culture in particular that experience rebirths. All right, so I've got some good responses here. Francesca, there you go. I was waiting for somebody to take on three. R&B music, definitely, definitely, good call. Um, let's see if some people can answer a little bit more with what has experienced the Renaissance in our own culture. What's come back? You know, um, one of the things that I kind of laugh about is you see these people at school wearing Birkenstocks. They were real popular in like 1998, 1999, and then all of a sudden, 20 years later, Vans. That's a great answer. Um, we do a set project second semester where we look at a company and Vans were almost dead. They were being sold for like $1 a share, and then I believe Converse bought them, or I don't know, some other major shoe company bought them, and now they're obviously taking off again. It's good. All right, so renaissances have happened all over the world. China had a renaissance, and during the Tang and Song dynasty we talked about last week, where they basically advanced all of the things that they had made during the Han dynasty and created them into cooler things like paper that could be turned into money, and fireworks, and that could be turned into cannons, and you know, compasses that actually could be put on boats. So um, Renaissance is a very biased term. I want you to understand that, because we experience renaissances in our culture all the time too. Okay, so I want to kind of differentiate the word Renaissance, and when we use it, we're referring to the European Renaissance, which occurred between about 1350 and 1600. And let me also get it right, and just so you guys understand, it didn't necessarily affect the common person like we think it did. Okay, just because this work of art was produced, it had a astounding effect on the upper classes and on the church, but it took a couple hundred years, and even let's say what, 5, 6, 700 years for it to really sink in and cause a lot of the other movements or be tied into other movements. And so a lot of the current events that you have um, studied, whether it be climate change, whether it be um, LGBTQ plus rights, whether it be Black Lives Matter movement, Me Too movement, etc. Um, these movements are revolving around people thinking um, and arguing for what is right. And the Renaissance encouraged this idea of thinking. Okay. And I think it was Ian that put philosophy wasn't something that the Greeks looked at, and a couple other people might have as well. And philosophy is thinking about thinking. It's called metacognition. And so when you start to think about what you're thinking about, you start to produce new thoughts and new ideas. And so that's been happening ever since this time period. But there had to be some key things for this to happen. So that's what we're going to look at today and probably the rest of the week. This should be kind of fun. I want to kind of switch to share real quick here and go over to my Canvas page. And so under modules, if you go down to week 17, you're going to see that I added a week 17 Renaissance note sheet. If you're someone who is better apt to take notes on the graphic organizer, feel free to download this. and put it on a Google Doc and just kind of follow along my screen if you want to take notes on what you think is important here. It'll definitely help you on the final exam, and you won't have to be looking up this PowerPoint and the 80 slides that are on it, because a lot of them are just pictures. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, so again, I put this up this morning just because sometimes I'm not going to lie, I'll go off the deep end on some of these topics. So this is a way for you to stay focused. Okay. All right. So on that note, I'm still missing a few people maybe responding here, but we're getting a little more action than usual. So thank you. And we're going to move on. I am working from home, which is a little bit weird just because the kids were up from like 1:30 to 4 last night. I needed to help my wife out this morning. So here we are. Haven't done this since the spring. All right. So again, we talked about Renaissance being rebirthed, and things have been rebirthed again, but this time we're looking at the Italian Renaissance, and this is kind of a classic symbol of the Italian Renaissance. This building was designed by Michelangelo, and if you look kind of down, I obviously I took this picture. You can see people on the bottom, but you'll see these outdoor statues right here in the middle. You'll see, if you look real closely, you'll see the David by Michelangelo, and that's an exact replica of the David that Michelangelo produced that sits in a museum. They have to pay $20 to go into, 20 euros, but it's outside. And this is the city of Florence, Italy. All right. In Italian, it's Firenze, but this is where the Italian Renaissance really took off. And this building is kind of symbolic of the Renaissance because not only did Michelangelo produce this, but he produced it for the family that started the Renaissance. And that was not started, but paid for most of it. And that is the family known as the Medici family. All right. And that's why if you ever get a chance to go to Florence, Italy, it's literally what I call a living art museum. Okay, you can go outside and see these sculptures and statues by some of the most famous artists that kind of changed history. And you don't even have to go inside. It's outside. All right. Some of the other images that we might chat about here. On the upper right-hand corner, this is the Ponte Vecchio. This is a bridge that connected the building you just saw, known as this is the Uffizi, which means offices in Italian. And that's connected, this bridge, to their palace, which is on the other side of the river, known as the Pitti Palace and the Boboli Gardens. Here's a picture right from the bridge looking down at the same bottom right, looking down at the same offices. On the bottom left is the baptistry of this church right here on the top left, known as the Duomo, or the Santa Maria de Basilica de Santa Maria de Fiore, or the Duomo as they call it. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. All right, so a couple things we want to talk about then. Why did this happen in Italy and not in, let's say, France or Greece or the Holy Roman Empire or Spain, etc.? Well, basically after the Crusades, Italy became the center for learning in Western Europe, and that happened for a few reasons. One, their cities, their city-states, since they weren't all unified, they had an advantage with trade in the Mediterranean Sea. So anything that came into Western Europe and then went up north to France, which was becoming wealthier, and or Spain or the Holy Roman Empire, or even England had to come through the Italian city-states first. After the Black Plague, which was 1346 to 1353, a wealthy merchant class that we kind of called burghers yesterday, they're able to trade with Arab merchants after the Crusades, even though they hated each other and it created a rivalry. It gave a kind of a new economic opportunity, and the Italians were in the place to benefit from this. Also, then, like you can't discredit what the Romans did. The Romans built roads that I stayed on a Roman road 5 years ago. Yeah, that's how long their roads have lasted. Our roads last like 10 years. Some of them less, like 5, until they get potholes. Okay. Statues, columns. I believe you said columns, buildings, like the Colosseum, Circus Maximus, the Pantheon. We're all around them. Like, even though learning had died and technology hadn't progressed for 1,000 years since the fall of the Roman Empire, there were still these things around them that were there. Okay. And so after money started flowing into Italy and some of these works of art that the Greeks produced, or some of the philosophical ideas that they produced that were basically copied into Arabic and kept at this library in Egypt called Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the world that was largely destroyed. When those works were brought back to Europe, they got into the hands of a few pretty smart people that decided, you know what, we're going to be inspired by them. We're going to change the game, but we're going to have to do it slowly. Lastly, then, if you remember right, the Catholic Church was filthy rich. Okay. Remember how they taxed? Okay. They got to keep 10% of everyone's money. They owned up to 30% of the land, and they made the laws for, let's say, 700-800 years. Okay. So over that much time, that much money allowed them to do basically whatever they wanted. And so they're indirectly, and this is going to tie into next week. I want you to make sure you're paying attention. I know some of you are already saying, well, this guy is boring. I want to go back to bed. Pay attention to this, because this does affect the modern world. The Catholic Church will indirectly bring themselves down. Okay. I know there's still 1 billion Catholics in the world today, but they are not the center of the universe like they were for 800 years in Western Europe, okay, during the Middle Ages. All right. You don't need to write this down per se, but I think it's just good for you to look at this map, okay? So you'll notice that Italy is broken up into what are called like city-states. And we've talked about city-states. It's just like a state that usually has a capital city. So the Republic of Florence has Siena, and maybe you've heard of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Okay, that's in Florence. The Republic of Genoa, that's where Christopher Columbus was originally from. You've got Milan right here. Okay, you've got Venice, which is the Venetian Republic, or the Dalmatian coast. You'll see how much land that they control, but the capital is at Venice. Okay, Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. You got Naples as the capital. This purple part right here in the middle, Rome, like the church actually owned all of that land themselves. They called it the Papal States. All right, so all of these city-states then basically set out to try to rival each other to get the most amount of money and the most trade. And so they were trying to get these exotic works and different pieces of ancient history from the Egyptians, from the Greeks, from the Muslims, even as far as China. And so the church kind of saw this competition going on, and they said, all right, well, we want to get involved in this too. And so the church started using their money from poor peasants, literally, to start buying some of these works of art. The family that really accelerated this whole thing was actually a banking family. Okay. And this one you probably want to put down in if you're taking notes on hand, or if you're taking them off that graphic organizer, maybe make a side note. The Medici family, Medici, was from Florence, and they would go on to be one of the most famous families in the history of the world for various reasons. But the first thing that made them wealthy was they took a product that they got from the Muslim merchants, and they put it on the wool that came from the north and northern Europe, and then they sold that wool for a huge price. It was basically like a material or like a chemical that caused the whatever color the dye was put on the wool, it stayed on the wool. All right. They used that money then to create a bank. And banks, what banks do is banks loan money, and then they make people pay back in interest. Okay. So if Francesca wants $1,000 from the Bank of Brunette, I'm cool with that as long as she understands that every month she doesn't pay it back. I charge a compounding interest of 5%. So if she doesn't pay it back within a year, she owes me $1,600 or $1,800 or $2,000. So banking is a pretty lucrative industry. The Medici family, at one point or another, this is kind of crazy, loaned money to the King of France and the King of England, who were fighting each other in a series of wars known as the 100 Years' Wars, which basically lasted from about 1350 to 1450. Okay, so both sides were taking money from the Medicis in order to pay for their war. The Holy Roman Emperor, which was a Habsburg, okay, located in what is now like modern day Czechoslovakia, was loaning money from the Medici family. The Pope, who wanted to build the largest church in the world, borrowed money from the Medicis. The Venetian Doges, these are the people who controlled the Venetian Republic, borrowed money, and so did the Ottoman Empire, which is the empire that took down the city of Constantinople, as we talked about yesterday. And so by loaning money, and all of these people, if you look at this owing you money, you loan it out, now they owe you, you indirectly have what over them? Somebody unmute or say it in the chat. What do you have over them by doing that?
Power.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Medici family, through their connections of banking, were able to essentially do whatever they wanted to do. Okay, they didn't have to follow the same rules that everybody else did, all the other noble families, because people owed them money. The grandfather of the Renaissance is Cosimo de' Medici, and he basically was what we'd call like the mayor of Florence. And the godfather of the Renaissance, the person who patroned some people that you maybe have heard of before, like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo Buonarroti, Sandro Botticelli. It sounds like I'm naming Ninja Turtles, but I'm not. Lorenzo de' Medici, also known as Lorenzo the Magnificent, because he patroned all these famous artists and their works, would go down as the godfather of the Renaissance. This guy, typically known as the one who took the risks to get this whole thing going, okay? And he could do that because his family was the wealthiest in Europe. Side note, 3 Medicis would go on to become popes, okay? And you're probably asking yourself, how does a family make themselves the pope? If you have enough money, you can do anything. So they literally bought the office of the Pope. Okay. The most powerful person in all of Western Europe and in all of the Christian world, once the Catholics and the Spanish and the Portuguese take over almost all of the Americas, is 3 of them are going to be Medici's. Okay, wrap your head around that one. That's the Queen of France is also, like, multiple queens of France are Medici's. His family was pretty powerful. All right, so let's talk a little bit about then these themes that are going to come up. Okay, these new scholars that are receiving works of art from the medieval or from the classical world, like Greece and from Egypt, they started to look down on the Middle Ages and say, like, man, you guys were old, you didn't do anything, and basically, like, learning stopped for over 1,000 years. You didn't press the envelope, you didn't press science, you didn't press philosophy, you didn't really think for yourselves, you just did what you were told. And so this idea that you'll hear the word classical, and I could tell some people will Google search the answers on the warm up and then copy and paste them into the chat function, which makes me kind of laugh. But I want you to understand this. I think this is on your final. Classical learning, like when you hear that, like there's even a couple schools. There's a school in Indianapolis called the Renaissance School. Some of you may have heard of the Oaks Academy or know kids that went to school there. Literally, that means means Greek and Roman. Okay, in our European, Eurocentric, biased world. Everyone got that? Classical typically means Greek and Roman. So at the Renaissance school, what languages do you think they learn there? I got someone in chat function. Latin, Ian, spot on. And what the other one would obviously be not Italian. You're close. The other peninsula to the east. Greek. Yeah. Okay, so Greek and Latin. And Ethan, the Renaissance Hotel is some like garbage new hotel they built about 20 years ago, where I was best man at a wedding at. That's just a way to sell things. It's a bad connection to this topic. Sorry, but I'm sure the brunch was good. All right, here's where you want to start taking some notes, though. Okay. All right, so this would usher in a new idea that's really, again, life altering for the whole Western world, and that is this thing called humanism. And the root word of humanism is human, right? And this idea that a human has potential and can achieve something was way outside the box thinking at the time. Okay. The church had become so much involved and ingrained in these students' lives, or in not students' lives, but in the whole everyone in society's life in Western Europe, that there was this idea that you can't achieve anything outside of what's in the realm of the church, because that's not what God and that's not what the church was telling you to do. Okay. Nowadays, I hope all of you know that if you have a dream and continue to work for your goals, there's potential to do whatever you want. Okay, that is the dream now, but it's taken a long time, and obviously there's still a ton of discrimination in the world to this day, as we've already talked about in current events. But this whole idea of humanities and humanism is this idea that humans can achieve and think for themselves. Okay, they do not have to always do exactly what is told to them, but this idea that they have the capability, the brain, to think and achieve. Okay, so just an example of this: in the Middle Ages, people were taught that they had to wear pious clothes. That means like basically really basic, like clothes that were not colorful and that didn't show any type of expression because wearing these type of plain clothes didn't cause people to think bad thoughts about you or sexual thoughts or didn't show individual expression. Now, for the most part, wear whatever you want, and you're not going to offend God or anyone who works in the church. And if you do, it's your choice. Okay. So there's just kind of an example of humanism, at its core. All right. So, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, it starts this whole idea of achieving and thinking comes through with art. Okay. And it comes through with changes in art styles. All right, so medieval artists needed to use religious subjects and then convey them in a spiritual idea. So you use like the birth of Jesus, and you paint it so that people pray and try to get closer to Jesus. Renaissance artists, they still used religious ideas and religious subjects, but they showed their knowledge of new forms of art and of the ancient and classical world by using more realistic copies and more Greek and Roman ideals. Okay. And so they'll copy the Greek body style. They'll make it look way more realistic. They'll include emotion in the pictures. They make people look like people instead of making people just a bland, inanimate object. They give life to people. They give color to art, and they give what's called perspective. I think I have it on here. I hope so. No, I don't, maybe, but we'll go to that in a second. Even they started painting prominent leaders, like individual portraits, which to you that sounds, well, kind of dumb because you're like, oh, well, I got to go get my school picture every year. Well, people couldn't have pictures drawn of them, even if they were wealthy, because that was looked at as sacrilegious or anti-religious because it wasn't a subject of religion. All right, so um again, the Renaissance is easily seen through these changes in art. Okay, I wanted to give you an idea of medieval art. So on the left, you have a Greek piece of medieval art that came from the Byzantine Empire. This is an icon. So this is Jesus holding the kind of the key to heaven, and you see the halo around him. And mosaics were like pieces of tiny glass and tile that were put together. On the right, you see what we had called illuminated manuscripts, if you remember right. And these were books that were produced with pictures so that people who couldn't read, someone could read it to them or translate it, and then they could see what's happening in the picture. So this is the baptism of Saint John, and he's being baptized in a barrel. Okay, you'll notice, yes, there is some color, but there's very little individual reflection there. Lack of detail. It's almost to a point where it's difficult to figure out what is actually happening. Okay. New Renaissance art then. Take a look at these two pictures. Is there kind of a good example of what Renaissance artists started to like use the skill that they gained from studying these works that came from Egypt and Greece? Okay. On the right, you're going to see one of the more iconic paintings. It is Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. Okay. I want you to get a good look at it. Those of you that take geometry or have probably taken basic math, you know what squares and you know what rectangles are, right? You see the square shapes in this. That's the study of geometry. Okay. That is Leonardo da Vinci basically telling everybody who is looking at this painting that he had studied algebra and geometry from the Muslim world and was smart enough to put it in a painting in a Christian setting. This is the Last Supper. This is where Jesus comes up with this whole idea of communion, celebrating his body and blood, which Christians celebrate differently, but it's the most important sacrament to all Christians. So 2.5 billion people on the earth today. And yet Jesus here, if you look in the background past Jesus' head, there's like mountains and fields back there. Renaissance artists put these people in these like landscapes, showing that they knew like the beauty of the nature and the natural world as well. If you got a closer look at this, which we'll look at later, you'll see the exquisite like clothing that they're wearing, the detail, the money from Judas. You'll also again notice that it's set in this like second story, very modern looking apartment building that could basically look like an apartment from 2020. And this is being painted in the late 1300s. Okay, so or sorry, mid 1400s. Take a look at picture at the left. This is a Gothic cathedral. All right. What do you see that's Greek and Roman here? Anybody?
The pillars?
Definitely the pillars. These are Corinthian columns. These are arches. Okay. So that was definitely Roman. Good. A couple of you pointed out the same thing. You see more squares here, though, on the ceiling, correct? Study of geometry. And then you also see in both of these pictures what's known as a vanishing point. Some of you that take art class, probably like intro to art, I'm imagining that you work on something that's 3D related or you have in middle school. And so each one of these pictures has a vanishing point upon which all geometric lines in the picture come from the same point. Where is it in the picture on the left? Where's the vanishing point? Anybody know? Every single geometric line comes from it. Okay, if you look back in the middle, bottom, middle, you should be able to kind of tell that everything is coming from that spot. That's the deepest spot in the painting. If you look on the right, okay, the vanishing point is actually way back behind what are these windows? Yep, behind Jesus. Yep. And so, I mean, you've heard of 3D before, but these artists used these to make certain things look smaller, put people in perspective and closer up. And again, helps you experience the emotion. And then it also is a sign of their natural intelligence that they're kind of secretly putting in these paintings and art without letting the church kind of know about it yet. The church isn't smart enough to figure this out. All right. We are at 8:41. I want to respect the fact that you guys, you have been on here for 40 minutes. A lot of you have been engaged. I appreciate that. So here's what I want to do. I just want to switch to share over real quick here. And I wanted to go to Google. I had a few questions under modules. If you go to week 17, the intro, I'm assuming a lot of people turned this in because it was pretty easy. Let's see how many. I've got 22 submissions so far. This is due tomorrow by the end of period 3. Remember, you can just put if you can't print it off and draw on it, or if you don't want to figure out how to use a stylus to make a goofy picture, then you can just put a computer generated image in there. That'll cause you to do a little bit of research about the artist that's on there, the idea. That's perfectly fine with me. And then, again, if you didn't turn in your African travel poster, I need that to be done as soon as possible. Okay. I need to do not leave here. I've got to take a picture because I don't have a class roster on me. So I got to take a picture of the attendance real quick. And then once I do that, you get out of here, okay? I'll let you know when literally. That's it. All right. Tomorrow we got some fun stuff. Tomorrow we're going in straight art and all these game-changing pieces of art, all right? Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic morning, okay? Stay warm. We'll see everybody tomorrow.
Bye. Thank you.